series of famous rabbis of yesteryear. Now, it's chronicled over, listed on the Haim website, 18th of Tevet, Yudchet Tevet, as a Hilula of Rabbi Haim David Corinaldi, very famous rabbi of his time. I believe he would be a rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, in Italy. I think, especially during the first half of the 18th century, he was a Talmud of, I think, En Pincherel and rabbi at Reggio, if I'm not mistaken, Leron, and Trieste, respectively. He would write the Beit David book, House of David on the Mishnah. And there's various diagrams, I think, in his work relating to various different, let's say, Jewish law point of views. He had great mathematical knowledge, as we've got to point out also, and wrote notes on the code of Jewish law, which much of it, I think some of it might be published by Rabbi Azilei, if I'm not mistaken, and manuscripts, let's say, of sermons delivered in Trieste, respectively, articles on the Divrei Shalom ve'emet, and very, very interesting. Let's explore a few of the highlights of the famous rabbi's life. So very, very interesting. Much can be said over within regards to him. He's actually featured in the Jewish Encyclopedia. Also, that's something that we have to point about, be it as it is may. Okay, so let's explore a few of the highlights of the great rabbi's life. Now, I think he was, if I'm not mistaken, approximately born, chronicled over, around the period of 1705. This is, and he would really, let's just say, it says, Harab Corinaldi mita'er b'achat midrashotav sherov yamav lamad Torah mitoch yisurim kashim. With great difficulties, he would actually learn Torah in of itself during his life. Hayabaki b'mada'im shonim. He was an expert in regards to various different topics. Kefi shnikar makad moto lesefer Beit David. He would actually give an instruction in the book of David. Let's say, Shemofia kuntrus hatzorot uba mishpatim begeometria shudatam nachutza lavantam b'mishnah. He was like a master in when it came to arithmetic, within regards to numbers, and so on and so forth. I think Perush there'll be on Sanhedrin, if I'm not mistaken. In I'm not sure the exact daf in of itself. Al hashelolim kriyat sefer Aristo shesifro. So very, very interesting. Much can be, can see just chronicled over here inside the book, inside this specific description in of itself, with his, let's say, his various commentaries and the importance of, I think he would talk about natural medicines or natural wisdom, let's just say, in of itself over there. Okay, so let's be it as may. I think Hayachatzono Shel Rabbi Yitzchak Pachipiko. I hope I pronounce his name correctly. He was, I think, one of the famous rabbis of Venice. I think a rabbi we've mentioned before here on the series. Very, very great rabbi. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was, let's just speak about Rabbi Yitzchak for a minute. I think he passed away in the year Tavkuf Vav, if I'm not mistaken. He was many years, I think, head of Jewish court in Venice, respectively. He would take on, he was really a prominent rabbi, let's just say, during the, once again, also in the earlier parts of the 18th century. I think he would study Torah from various rabbis also, which is something I have to point out. It says, Nolda Aviv Rabbi Asher Shalom, the Matram Pira Bashel and Kona Amakabar Rav Yosef Pimieta, if I'm not mistaken. So Rav Yitzchak would actually be a Talmud of Rav Pimieta, who was, I think, rabbi of Ancona and the Rosh Hashiva, if I'm not mistaken, the famous Pietan and a Kabbalist of Italy. I think his book, the Shomrim LeBoker, I think, would be printed at one stage in time, and there was gatherings of the Or Bokar, which was, let's say, Piyutim and Tfilot, which was written by Rav Yamata and Rabbi Yitzchak Pachi Pico. I hope I pronounced it correctly. He Kiddush of Rosh B'Rosh HaChibur Hayam Roshei HaMitnagdim LeRamachal V'Chatam B'Shem Rabbanei Venetia Al Mispar Ikrat B'Nosai. He would actually write various different letters with regards to the topic of the Ramchal itself, where they were trying to find his status. I think Rabbi Yitzchak's daughter, Bito Simcha Nis'al Rabbi David Haim Corinaldi, who we were speaking about before, so he was a father-in-law of Rabbi Corinaldi, who obviously we're speaking about today, happens to have been the author of the Beit David book on the Mishnah. He himself, Rabbi Yitzchak, was the author of various books, including Shuvat Ha'im HaPasuk Kiba, and who Chelek Mishiratayam, also Mispar Tishvot, he would actually print or Scott. But Polmos, let's just say, Haram Machal, with regards to Ramchal itself, and Tshuvot be'inyan, takanot nisuin shel chevra nisuin, besof sefer drushut lekhoim musa chelek bet. And very interesting. So he was a famous, let's just say, rabbi of his time that is brought down in many, many different places. But let's go back over here to Rabbi Haim David Corinaldi here on this special edition. Over here. B'yoto be'rojio. חייתו דעתו על צורת האות ו' במילה שלום, in pasuk, הנני נותן את בריתי שלום, with regards to this, quoting pasuk, I think in chapter 25 of the book of במדבר, לדעתו, על פי דברי התלמוד הבבלי, וזאת צריכה להיות קטועה ולא בצורה ו' רגילה, ובכך פסל את רוב הספרים, שהיו באותו עת ברוז'יה, הדבר עורר פולמוס, נרחב בין חכמי רוז'יה, שהתגלגל גם בוונציה והוכרע לאחר כ10 שנים על ידי הרב אריה לייב מאמסטרדם שפסק כנגד דעת הרב קורינאלדי. So that's something that we have to chronicle. Who was Rabbi Aryeh Leib Amsterdam? He was another famous rabbi of his time, someone that, let's just speak about him for a minute. I think he lived between 1690 to 1755. He was a rabbi, outstanding Talmid Chacham, from the Ashkenazic countries, actually, interesting enough. So I think from Lvov, and I think he was the rabbi of the Ashkenazic community of Amsterdam. He actually came from great auspices. I think his father was Rav Shaul, if I'm not mistaken, who was a famous rabbi. And yeah, very, very interesting, and did various different importances, let's just say. During his time, he was a rabbi of the Tzibur. He was Po'alah HaTziburi VaTorani, let's just say, in himself. I think Rav Moshe Margalit, the author of the Play Moshe, was, which was book on the Talmud Yerushalmi, would go on to become his student. Rav Moshe Margalit, I believe we've spoken about also before, I believe also once again from the Ashkenazic community. That's something that we have to point out. Actually, Rav Amsterdam, let's just say, he had great descendants. Rav Shaul Amsterdam, who was, I think, appointed the chief rabbi, let's say the rabbi of the Ashkenazic community after him in Amsterdam. Another son, Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Levin, if I'm not mistaken, who became a head of Jew community in Berlin, in Germany. His daughter Dina, Rabbi Dina, would get married to Rabbi Shaul Halevi. He's a great rabbi. He was the head of Jewish court in Amsterdam. Another famous rabbi, I think we've mentioned about him before. I think he was German rabbi, if I'm not mistaken. Another one of his daughters, Rabbi Sarah Leah, would get married to Rabbi Yitzchak ben Rabbi Mordechai Halevi, who was, I think, the rabbi of Krakow, if I'm not mistaken, another famous rabbi. Then also his other daughter, Rabbanit Nachma, I believe, Nietzsche, she would get married to Moshe Bar Yosef Shaya Parneski, Lad Levuv, once again, was really, really responsible for his congregation in itself. And I think they would have famous descendants and others, possibly other children also. That's something that would have to just look into also. But let's go back to the topic of Rabbi Corinaldi here. That's something that we have to speak about. Now, his book called the Beit David, of your, what was it? Sefer Beit David, Amsterdam, I think it was printed in Taf Tzadik Chet and Taf Tzadik Chet, Kolel Ha'orot al Mishnah, Va'al Kama Meme Varsheha, Perushi Rabbi Avadia Bortanora, we'll be concentrating on those Perushim, and the Tosfot, Yom Tov also, which is something else that we have to point out. Kol Ramaz, Rabbi Moshe Zachut. Remember, Rabbi Moshe Zachuta, or Rabbi Moshe ben Mordechai Zachut, was a famous Italian rabbi and a Kabbalist of his time. He actually lived between 1625 and 1697. So that was close to the time period when Rabbi Haim David Corinaldi was alive. That's something that we have to point out over there, which is very, very interesting. Beit David. Okay, he actually says here, Maim Chaim leba'al pri chadash. I think he was very, very familiar with works of the famous Pri Chadash, who was another great rabbi of his time. Hasefer Zacha Laskamot Migdolei Chachmei Italia, Polin Ashkenaz. I think these books would, respectively. Who was the author of Pri Chadash? Was a famous Rabbi Chizkiah de Silva, who was a famous, let's say, a posek, a shluchei d'Rabbanan in his time, and a famous rabbi in Eretz Israel. And I think he would spend much time in Livorno, in Italy, if I'm not mistaken. He would eventually end up in Eretz Israel in, I think when he was about 20 years of age, he'd go to Jerusalem and would actually learn under the famous Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Chagiz, part of the Yeshivat Bet Yaakov, great Talmudic, let's just say, institution. I think the Pri Chadash would get married at 22 to Chana, the daughter of Rabbi Raphael Mordechai Malki, who was another great rabbi. I think there was a family connection to Rabbi Moshe Chagiz also. Rabbi Mordechai Malki, I think Raphael Mordechai Malki, was a rabbi of Jewish law. He was a man of congregation. He was a doctor and would actually go to Jerusalem, I think from Italy, if I'm not mistaken, and was considered one of the famous rabbis until he passed away. I think his father-in-law, Chamiv Shel Rabbi Moshe HaChagiz, was him, who obviously was one of the great rabbis of Jerusalem in the 18th century. V'chotol Shel Rabbi Ezra Malki, we have to point out, Rabbi Ezra Malki was another rabbi, I think, in Rhodes, in Greece, and the author of the Malki B'Kadesh, Shemel Lama'or, and the Ein Mishpat V'Ein Nemayim. I think we spoke about him before. So he was a very, very famous rabbi, we have to point out. And so this Rabbi Cheskia de Silva, I think Rabbi Cheskia de Silva will have a son called Rabbi David de Silva, if I'm not mistaken, who was also another great rabbi, if I'm not mistaken. And he was also very much part of Jerusalem during the 18th century. It was considered also a doctor, if I'm not mistaken, and took on various different important positions over there also. So that's something that we very much have to point out over here. Friends, I'm going to take just a short 1-minute break over here. So please just wait here in the meantime, and I'll be back in 1 minute. And please don't forget, just like the videos, please click like, enjoy and click like on the videos, and I'll be back in 1 minute, friends, over here. Just a short 1-minute break, friends, over here. Okay, thanks everyone for being patient and waiting as we're continuing over here speaking about a very, very famous rabbi of his time over here on this special edition. So everyone, welcome to our community. If you are new here, we're speaking about Rabbi David Haim Corinaldi, who was a very famous Italian rabbi of his point in time, and a rabbi I believe we've spoken about here on various occasions before here inside this series. So if you're new over here, welcome to our community, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll really, really appreciate it. So we're going to keep speaking about him. A few more highlights. We're going to speak about his book in a minute also, which is I think very, very important. So we're talking about the Beit David book, which I think very much connected to other great rabbis like the Pri Chadash, who we've spoken about before. Lakad mechudashei Beit David nitfas b'sivrei mishnayot hanafotzoot b'mador tosfot anshe Shem hayu sheta'anu kenegdo shesefer ze הוא גנבה סבורתית ממחבר אחר, רבי יצחק למפרונטי, בעל חד יצחק יצא להגנתו. So remember, we've spoken about the famous Rabbi Yitzchak Lampronti on various occasions before here inside this series. He was a famous rabbi also of his time, and I think we did record a video about him. Just say something about him for a minute. I think he lived between 1679 to 1756. So their lives will overlap. He was also a physician, an educator, known as the author of the rabbinic encyclopedia, the Pachad Yitzhak, and an Italian rabbi, if I'm not mistaken. He actually was born in Pereira, if I'm not mistaken. His great-grandfather was Rabbi Shmuel Lampronti, who emigrated, I think, to Ferrara from Constantinople, very much so, and I think he had a close relationship with other rabbis, including the famous Rabbi Isaac Cantarini, another rabbi we've spoken about here on various occasions before, was also a poet and Talmudic scholar and author of the Tikkun Olam, if I'm not mistaken. I think he would study Rav Lampronti would spend a lot of time with medical studies and would teach in various different Italian cities over there. And I think he was so great, the local yeshiva granted him a title as a Haver, which is very, very interesting. And he had a very colourful way, let's just say, in himself. He gave various different grandiose sermons. He worked in Italian synagogues, if I'm not mistaken. And I think his name appears among signatures of various different responses issued by various different prominent yeshivot of his time. And I think he succeeded Rabbi Rekanti, who was his previous teacher, Rabbi Shabtai Rekanti, as a rabbi of Sephardic synagogue. And he was appointed the head of the famous Ferrari yeshiva, if I'm not mistaken, at that point in time, and he would be the author of the Pachad Yitzhak. So these are important things just to point out within regards to him. And I recommend everyone to watch that video we recorded about the great Chacham in a previous occasion. Okay, it's very, very interesting. So it says over here, Ha'orot ha'mechabe mit הפיינית לעיתים בתקיפות, ולכן זכו לביקורות חריפה מאת אחד מחוכמי דורו, הרב דוד פרדו, בספרו על המשנה שושנים לדוד, which is also printed, I think, in Venice, בו הרבה להסיק על דברי הבית דוד. הפולמוס עורר מתח בין אישים אלו, וחכמי ונציה טרחו להשכין שלום ביניהם. So we're just reading over what Wikipedia says of here. וכן בהקדמת החלק השני של השושנים לדוד, התנצל הרב דוד פרדו בפני בעל בית דוד, על חליפתו סגנונו בחלק הראשון, והוסכם על התחייבות הדדית שלו לקנטר זה את זה. This just says over here, in just to translate, just to state in English within regards to the book. So I think it would bring about various different robust debates, this book will in of itself, which is very, very interesting. And Rav David Pardo will speak about him for a minute, and there was always, I think, robust debates and discussions and comments on the books. Who was Rabbi David Pardo? He's another rabbi I think we've spoken about here on various occasions before, very colourful one. He lived between 1718 or 1719, maybe approximately 1792. He was the author of a book on Leviticus, the book of Vayikra, Maskil David, I think, which was printed in 1760 in Venice. I think he was the son of Rabbi Yaakov Pardo of Ragusa, if I'm not mistaken. And he would live a window of time in Sarajevo, and he would go on to be in Split also, I think, which is part of Croatia. He was quite close to Rabbi Avram David Papo also, if I'm not mistaken, and various other famous rabbis. I think Rav Pardo will actually become the chief rabbi of Sarajevo in Bosnia. He would succeed Rabbi Joshua Isaac Machora, who I believe was another famous rabbi of his time. And he published works. He was a writer. I think he would end up in Jerusalem towards the end of his life, if I'm not mistaken. It was very, 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 let's just say, famous in his time. That's something that we have to point out. Just a few more insights within regards to Rabbi David. So we're just speaking about him for a minute. I think he actually got married to his wife from Split, from Croatia, if I'm not mistaken, the city Split, and would really help him with literacy and literature. He would have 3 children called Yaakov, Isaac, and Abraham, and 1 daughter, very interesting, after the names of the Avot. And I think one of them got married to Rabbi Abraham Penzer, who was the author of Pei Zutra, which is a colossal work, I think, in 1798. And I think Rabbi Avram Pardo would get married to the daughter of the famous Rabbi Haim David Azilei. Interesting enough. And Rabbi Isaac, if I'm not mistaken, would actually succeed him as a rabbi of Sarajevo. So who was Rabbi Abraham Pinto? We actually did record a video about him. He was a Bosnian rabbi, a writer from Sarajevo. He would be a Rosh Yeshiva, head of Jewish court there, and lived in Jerusalem, as we mentioned before. It's actually interesting. Rabbi Pardo would actually write various different Torah colossal works, including Miktam LeDavid, the Chastei David, the Chukah Pesach, the Menetzech LeDavid, various different works, and there was various also liturgical works, let's just say, in of itself. And I think some of the notes on his Talmud are found in the Vienna edition, if I'm not mistaken, which printed 1860 to 1872. And I think in various other decisions, the let's say Halakim, portions in of itself. So that's something else that we've got to point out and just illustrate the brilliance of those rabbis, especially at that time period, where you could say it was like kind of a golden age at that point in time within regards to Torah flourishing and excellency, especially in Italy, places like Italy, Turkey, and so on and so forth. It was at a very, very high level the Torah was, and much was actually being done at that stage in time. So that's something important to point out. Welcome everyone, if you are live now. Welcome to our community as we're exploring the history of some of the great rabbis of yesteryear, and it's mamash, it's really no exception today as we're exploring the life of another rabbi that will really make his mark in Italy, especially during his day. So it's always a great pleasure to actually speak about great Chachamim. So let's just continue, just say another word within regards to him. We spoke about the Rabbi David Pardo, obviously, just right now, who was, I think, had a connection to him. We're speaking about Rabbi Haim David Corinaldi. Just to give on, it's just give him a few more tidbits within regards to him. Chiburim nusafim ha'arot el arbat chalkei hashulchan aruch chelek mehem huva al yidei hachidah. So that's what I think the Chidah will bring some of his things in his book called Yishurei Bracha, which was another great book. Drashot Shedrash Be'ir Trist Hayub Ktav Yad, that was in manuscript form, and the Kuntris Divrei Shalom Emet Al Surot HaKtiva HaNachona Shel Ha'ot Vav B'Pasuk Nin Noten Lo Et Briti Shalom. We just quoted that pasuk before, and I think he's mentioned in various other books, including the Toldot Gudlei Yisrael Book Onei Italia, if I'm not mistaken, on page 75, and Harav Simcha Chasida, if I'm not mistaken, the Contrast Badin, which was in Ketiyah de Shalom, if I'm not mistaken, over there. So very, very interesting. He's mentioned also, that was on Wikipedia, I was also using. Also, the National Library will have, I think, some of his books and writings, if I'm not mistaken, which I very much recommend everyone to look into over here. So he's got various different publications, and obviously being a famous author of his time. And the Haimi website will also list him. And why the Haimi website lists him as 18th of Tibet, I think they're not sure exactly what date he passed away, but they will lift him over there because that's when Rabbi Eliezer McCracow, who was the head of Jewish court at the Kehila, Ashkenazi Kehila in Amsterdam, would give the Haskama, the approval of his book, the Beit David. I think this was back in the year 1738, which is very, very interesting. So he actually, as we said before, his father was famous Chacham, Rav Moshe, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously born in Reggio, in Italy. We spoke about that beforehand. We obviously spoke about that he did come with great Yirat Shemaim within regards to the Torah, and but he did suffer in his time. He got married to the daughter of Rabbi Yitzchak Picot, who was one of the famous rabbis of Venice at that time, author of the Mishpat Shalom we spoke about, and would really take various different undertakings. And I think he would actually be very well traveled also. I think around time period of 1738, he would go to various different cities, especially in Germany, and will eventually end up in Amsterdam. And I think that's where he will bring about his book, Beit David, which is a book on Mishnayot, respectively, over there at that point in time. I think it was in the year 1744 when he wrote his Kuntras called Divrei Shalom Ve'emet, which is a great Torah book, we have to say. And he would become the rabbi of Triasat, and work, I think, later on as rabbi of the city of Levana, if I'm not mistaken. And very, very great drashot he would give away in those vicinities. So they're not sure when he passed away, but because of the Haskama disapproval, they would actually predict that date or commemorate this date. I think just to explore a few of the highlights on the Beit David book, especially on Chelek Aleph, הקדמת המחבר, this was מלמד, חילול שמיים, ויוצאים מדרך התורה בהונאת האומות. So this is one of the teachings he will give over there. Not teaching, מלמד, שאסור לחשוב מחשבה רעה על אדם שעניינו מסופק. I think this very much comes from page number 63 over there in the Beit David. Another teaching, מלמד, שמדי דברו בה, יכתוב על ספר, מה אשרוהו מן השמיים. This actually comes from חלק א' of the Beit David, if I'm not mistaken. Once again, it was printed in Amsterdam, this book, I think in the year 1738. Now, another teaching, this, I think, comes from Mesachet Peah, from the Beit David, and Chelek Aleph, at the first part, if I'm not mistaken. Now, a couple more short teachings. Over there, so that, I think, it comes from Mesachet Peah, also once again, from page 72 of this book, and the Beit David. And one last teaching, I think this comes from Beit David in Chelek Bet, actually concentrating on tractate Talmudim, and Sanhedrin, and it will be a great book of that time over there. So that's just a few of the highlights here from his book. Now, friends, we're a community here. We are learning about great rabbis of yesteryear. We have already recorded approximately more than 1,400 biography videos of great rabbis that really made their marks in yesteryear. So that's something interesting to point about. We're speaking about another famous rabbi here today. And please, anyone, if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please subscribe and join our community, as we've got fantastic content over here for everyone to enjoy and read. And there's obviously been a lot of fantastic feedback I've received within regards to that. So I really, really appreciate everyone that is watching over here today and taking the time. And friends, we are a community over here where we're not just exploring the history of great rabbis of yesteryear. New project we are working on is exploring the various different countries of the world who made their marks, which communities would really make their mark on Am Yisrael or on the world, make it massive, massive blueprints. So that's very, very interesting, and there's something to point out over here. But this rabbi really, really did make it, and you can see the greatness that was actually achieved. And also another thing we're doing is we're doing tours all over, not just of Bet Shemesh, especially of Jerusalem. We love to, all Yerushalmis, as they say, especially when it comes to celebrating in general, and very, very good excuse over here. So I think that's a good place to end the video, friends. And I can't stress enough to browse through the channel and look at the stories of the tzaddikim and the various other sections also. So I think it's very, very important. And we're just coming also in just to give a side note, the book of Shemot this week, and many different fantastic perushim within regards to that, which I recommend everyone to actually look into, and many great other, let's say, Torah importances, which is fine, very, very important in our project over here with what we are trying to achieve. So that's very, very interesting, friends. Over here now, friends, we're a community. Please drop a comment here below, and I really, really appreciate it. And we'll continue from going strength to strength, and so on and so forth. So I think it's very, very important, and maybe we'll meet up one day over here. And Be'ez Hashem, we're going to see the rebuilding of the third Beit Mikdash, and watch your space for some more great content. So thanks for watching. Take care and be well, everyone. Thank you.